Some people are waiting on God, but God is waiting on you. He's been speaking, He's been calling, He's been stirring your heart, and yet you're still standing there waiting for a sign. But what if I told you that the sign isn't coming from the sky? It's coming from your spirit. God is saying, I have placed something inside of you, now let's build it together. God is not looking for perfection. He is looking for participation. He is not waiting for the most qualified, the most talented, or the most experienced. He is waiting for the one who will say, here I am, Lord, use me. Too often we disqualify ourselves from the plans of God because we think we don't have enough wisdom, enough strength, enough resources. But God has never required enough. He only requires willingness. When God wanted to save the animals in a righteous family from the flood, He didn't build the ark Himself. He called Noah. When God wanted to deliver Israel from Egyptian bondage, He didn't send an angel to part the Red Sea. He called Moses to stretch out his staff. When Jesus wanted to feed the 5,000, He didn't create bread from nothing. He used the little boy's 5 loaves and 2 fish. Do you see the pattern? God moves through those who make themselves available. The problem with so many of us is that we spend too much time arguing with God about our limitations. We tell Him why we can't do it, why we aren't ready, why someone else would be a better choice. But God does not call the qualified, He qualifies the called. Moses told God, I am slow of speech. Gideon said, I am the least in my family. Jeremiah said, I am too young. But none of that mattered, because the moment they surrendered to God, He equipped them for the assignment. The enemy wants you to believe that you don't have what it takes, that you aren't smart enough, that you aren't gifted enough. But the devil is a liar. If God wanted someone else for the task, He would have called them, but He chose you. That means everything you lack, He will provide. Everything you don't know, He will teach. Everything you fear, He will strengthen you to face. All God needs is your yes. There are doors that won't open until you step forward. There are breakthroughs that won't happen until you move. Too many people are waiting on God to make the first move, but God is waiting on you. When Peter saw Jesus walking on the water, he could have stayed in the boat waiting for Jesus to come to him. But instead, Peter stepped out, and when he did, the impossible became possible. That's what God is calling you to do. Step out, move forward even when you don't feel ready. Walk by faith even when you don't see the whole picture. Trust that if God called you to it, He has already made provision for it. He is just waiting for a willing vessel. So stop hesitating, stop doubting, and stop waiting for the perfect moment. The perfect moment is now. God is ready to move. Are you? Faith is not just something you believe, it's something you do. Too many people sit back and wait for God to drop blessings into their lap. But faith was never meant to be passive. Faith is movement. Faith is action. Faith is stepping forward even when you don't see the full picture. When God told Abraham to leave his country and go to a land He would show him, Abraham didn't wait for a map or a detailed plan. He moved. He packed up his family, left behind everything familiar, and walked in obedience. That's faith in action. He didn't wait for the land to be revealed before he started walking. He walked, and then God revealed. The same is true for us. Many people are waiting for clarity before they obey. They want confirmation after confirmation. They want everything to make sense before they move. But God doesn't always give you the full picture. He gives you an instruction and waits to see if you'll trust Him enough to follow it. The miracle is not in the knowing. The miracle is in the moving. The woman with the issue of blood had been suffering for 12 years. She could have stayed in her house hoping and praying that Jesus would come to her, but she didn't. She got up, pressed through the crowd, and touched the hem of His garment. She didn't just believe Jesus could heal her. She acted on that belief. And the moment she did, healing flowed into her body. Faith without action is dead. You can believe all day long that God wants to bless you, but if you're unwilling to move when he speaks, you will miss what he has for you. If Noah had believed rain was coming but never built the ark, he would have drowned. If the Israelites had believed God would give them the promised land but refused to march around Jericho, the walls would have never fallen. If Peter had believed he could walk on water but never stepped out of the boat, he would have never experienced the supernatural. What is God asking you to do? Maybe he's telling you to start that business, write that book, step into ministry, or leave a toxic situation. But instead of moving, you're hesitating. You're waiting for a perfect moment. But hear me, there is no perfect moment. There's only faith. There's only trust. There's only obedience. You don't have to see the whole staircase to take the first step. You don't have to have everything figured out before you start. God honors action. He honors those who trust him enough to move even when it doesn't make sense. So stop waiting, stop hesitating, stop doubting. If you believe God has called you, move. If you believe he has spoken, act. Because when you step out in faith, you activate the supernatural. You open the door for miracles. You invite heaven to move on your behalf. But it all starts with a step. Will you take it? Obedience is the key that unlocks the strategy of God. Too often people pray for direction but ignore the instructions that have already been given. They ask for miracles but refuse to follow the process that leads to breakthrough. God does not reveal his full plan to those who only consider obedience. He reveals it to those who are committed to obedience. When you align your actions with God's will, you gain access to his divine strategy. Look at the life of Noah. God gave him an instruction, build an ark. There was no sign of rain, no evidence of a flood, no confirmation that what God said would happen. But Noah didn't argue, he didn't question, and he didn't delay. He obeyed, and because of that obedience, he received the blueprint for survival. God gave him specific measurements, materials, and timing. Had Noah refused to obey, he would have drowned in the very flood God was trying to prepare him for. That's how divine strategy works. God doesn't give solutions to those who are unwilling to follow his instructions. He didn't tell Joshua how the walls of Jericho would fall. He just told him to march. He didn't explain to Peter how walking on water worked. He just said, come. Every great move of God begins with simple obedience. But too many people miss their breakthrough because they want understanding before they act. God doesn't always explain himself first. Sometimes he just gives an instruction, and it's up to you to trust him enough to follow it. Naaman, the commander of the Syrian army, was a man of great power, but he had one problem. He was a leper. He sought healing from the prophet Elisha, and instead of a dramatic encounter, Elisha sent a simple instruction. Go dip in the Jordan River 7 times. Naaman was offended. He expected something grand, something worthy of his status. But healing wasn't in the drama, it was in the obedience. The strategy for his breakthrough was hidden in a simple act of faith. When Naaman finally humbled himself and followed the instruction, his skin was restored like that of a child. Miracles don't just happen because we wish for them. They happen when human effort meets divine power. Too many people sit back waiting for God to do everything, but God moves when we move. He takes what we bring, no matter how small, and multiplies it into something beyond our ability. Every breakthrough in Scripture required someone to take a step of faith, to do what they could with what they had, and then God stepped in with his supernatural power. When Jesus fed the 5,000, he didn't create food out of thin air. He used what was available, a small boy's 5 loaves and 2 fish. That little boy could have held on to his lunch thinking it wasn't enough to make a difference. But instead, he offered what he had, and Jesus took it, blessed it, and multiplied it to feed thousands. The miracle happened because someone was willing to give their small effort, and God did the rest. Moses stood before the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army closing in behind him. He didn't know what to do, but God asked him a simple question. What is in your hand? Moses had a staff. It wasn't much, but when he stretched it out over the water in obedience, God parted the sea. The miracle came because Moses did something. He didn't just cry out for help. He acted in faith, and God responded with power. Some people are waiting for God to open doors while they sit back doing nothing. But faith is not passive. The woman with the issue of blood didn't sit at home hoping Jesus would come find her. She pushed through the crowd, reached out, and touched the hem of his garment. That moment of effort, that act of faith, activated the power of God in her life, and instantly she was healed. God will never do for you what you refuse to participate in. When the Israelites needed water in the wilderness, God told Moses to strike the rock. When the walls of Jericho needed to fall, God told Joshua to march around the city. When Peter wanted to walk on water, Jesus told him to step out of the boat. Every miracle required action. It required someone to take what little they had and trust God to do the rest. You may feel like you don't have enough strength, enough wisdom, enough resources. But God is not asking for enough. He's asking for your willingness to move forward with what you do have. If you take a step, He will make a way. If you put in the work, He will supply the increase. If you bring your effort, He will bring His power. Stop waiting for everything to be perfect before you act. Miracles don't happen in comfort zones. They happen when faith is put to work. So move, act, trust, and give God something to bless. Because when your effort meets His power, the impossible becomes possible. Nothing great comes without resistance. The very presence of obstacles in your life is often the greatest proof that you are walking toward your destiny. If you were headed nowhere, the enemy wouldn't bother you. If your purpose was small, your opposition would be light. But when you are carrying something significant, when God has marked you for something greater, resistance will always show up to try to stop you. Look at Joseph. He had a dream from God, a vision of his future, but the moment he shared it, resistance came. His own brothers threw him into a pit and sold him into slavery. He was falsely accused, imprisoned, and forgotten. If he had judged his future by his struggles, he would have assumed the dream was a lie. But what Joseph didn't realize in the moment was that every attack was evidence that his destiny was real. If the dream had no power, it wouldn't have been fought so hard. David was anointed to be king, but the moment he was chosen, the battle began before he ever sat on the throne. He had to face a giant named Goliath. He had to run from King Saul, live in caves, and fight for his life. Why? Because his destiny was so great that the enemy tried everything to stop him from reaching it. But resistance is not rejection, it is confirmation. If the enemy is fighting you, it's because he sees what you don't yet see. He knows your future is greater than your present. Jesus himself faced resistance from the moment he was born. King Herod tried to kill him as an infant. The religious leaders plotted against him. He was betrayed, beaten, and crucified, but none of it was proof of his failure. It was proof of his assignment. The resistance he faced wasn't a sign that he was off course. It was a sign that he was right where he was supposed to be. Some of you are wondering why things have been so difficult. You're questioning why you keep facing obstacles, setbacks, and attacks. But what if I told you that the fight is not about where you are, it's about where you're going? The enemy wouldn't be attacking you if you weren't a threat. The resistance in your life is a sign that your calling is real, your purpose is powerful, and your future is worth fighting for. So don't give up because things are hard. Don't back down because the pressure is intense. The greater the resistance, the greater the destiny. The enemy wouldn't be trying to stop you if God wasn't about to elevate you. Keep pushing, keep pressing, and keep believing, because on the other side of resistance is the fulfillment of everything God has promised you. The struggle is not the end of your story. It's just proof that your story is worth telling. God never intended for you to sit on the sidelines of his plan. He created you with a purpose, equipped you with gifts, and positioned you for impact. You are not just a spectator in his work, you are a partner. He moves through those who are willing to align with his will and step into their divine assignment. From the very beginning, God designed humanity to work with him. When he created the earth, he gave Adam dominion over it. He could have managed everything himself, but he chose to give Adam authority. That means God doesn't just operate for you, he operates through you. He gives you vision, but he expects you to walk it out. He plants purpose inside of you, but he expects you to cultivate it. Look at Moses. God called him to deliver Israel from Egypt, but he didn't just do it all in one miraculous act. He told Moses, stretch out your staff. He told Moses to speak to Pharaoh, to lead the people, to step forward into the Red Sea before it parted. God provided the power, but Moses had to take action. The deliverance didn't come until Moses stepped into his role as God's partner in purpose. Too many people are waiting on God to do everything for them while ignoring what he has already placed in their hands. When Jesus turned water into wine, he told the servants to fill the jars with water first. When he raised Lazarus from the dead, he told the people to roll away the stone. When he fed the 5,000, he told the disciples to distribute the food. He could have done it all himself, but he invited people to participate in the miracle. God is calling you to participate in what he wants to do in your life. He has given you a calling, a gift, a passion, but it's your responsibility to step into it. Doors won't open if you don't knock. Opportunities won't come if you don't prepare. Miracles won't manifest if you refuse to move. God's power is waiting for your partnership. Some people wonder why their prayers seem unanswered, but often the answer has already been given. It's just waiting on their action. If Noah had prayed for safety but refused to build the ark, he would have drowned. If Peter had prayed for boldness but never stepped out of the boat, he would have never walked on water. God's provision is connected to your participation. The enemy wants to convince you that you are too weak, too unqualified, or too broken to be used by God. But the fact that you are here, the fact that you feel the pull of purpose is proof that God has already chosen you. The only question is, will you say yes? Will you step forward? Will you trust that what he started in you, he will bring to completion? Because when you partner with God, nothing can stop what he has destined for your life.